If you go down to the woods today, you're sure of the big surprise. Aliens. Aliens and a really shit book. Welcome to 19 Reasons to Read, the Tommyknockers. Hi everyone, I'm Dave Musson at Dave Musson on Instagram, and welcome back to my channel where I'm going through the works of Stephen King in chronological order and giving you 19 reasons to read every single one of his books. If that sounds like something you'd like more of, then do go and check out my other videos and maybe consider subscribing as well so you don't miss any in the future. So this one is going to be an interesting exercise. We're edging towards the end of the 80s and a small town in Maine called Haven that's been taken over by aliens. Yep, we've reached the Tommyknockers. This is a wild mess of a book, but there's still plenty of reasons to give it a go, and I'm going to pick out 19 of them right now for you in this video. Now, as always, there might be some spoilers ahead, but other than that, let's bite the bullet and get into it. Here are my 19 reasons to read the Tommyknockers. So this is far from a fan favourite. In fact, even King himself describes it as a awful book. But that's kind of interesting in itself, right? Now there is a reason behind this one's flaws. This is the last one that he wrote before he got clean, and you can kind of sense it throughout the writing. There are flashes of brilliance in this one, but you can also feel the excess and indulgence that his drug-addled brain was driving him through in creating this book. King himself says he feels like there's a better book in there if it was shrunk down to about half the length, and that's probably fair. So this book is actually spun out of a short story that King wrote called The Revelations of Becca Paulson. And for my money, that short story is actually one of the better parts of this book. It's got it all. Revenge, death, freakiness, and obviously a talking Jesus Christ. So let's examine the hook of this one. One of the main characters, a Westerns writer, Bobby Anderson, is out walking her little dog Peter in the woods and trips over something metal. She gets curious, starts digging. Turns out that metal thing that tripped her up is actually an alien spaceship buried in the woods just outside her home. By digging the spaceship up, Bobby unwittingly brings it back to life, and it emits a gas that floats over the town of Haven and causes the residents of Haven to become, i.e. transform into an alien. So these alien beings have some form of limited genius, usually brilliant inventions and ideas that are fueled by batteries. It also tends to make the people of the town violently stop others who might try and leave the town. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, Dave, you have not explained that very well at all. That is a mess. And for once, I cannot be held responsible. Because, friends, that's what this book is. It is a mess. An absolute fucking drug mashed up mess. And that's part of its charm. So one character who doesn't become is Guard, a poet who is also an alcoholic and who once got a standing ovation at a reading that he did, something that seems to have an unwarranted amount of coverage in this book. Guard is protected from those T-knocks by a metal plate in his head that he had fitted after a skiing accident. It's a pretty dull plot point, but is also quite useful in how things pan out. Anyway, Guard is a strange one to pin down. He's kind of the hero, but he's also not very likeable. Bobby would probably have been a better choice as the actual hero. So those transformations that the residents undergo when they are becoming is kind of cool, in a gross sort of way. They're definitely fun to read about, and we are looking for reasons to read this book after all. But when it comes to things that are fun to read about, the same cannot be said for the lengthy passages of the town's history that are peppered throughout the Tommyknockers. 100 plus pages of shut the fuck up, somebody get this guy an editor. So if you've been following with me on this chronological journey, you'll have probably picked up that dogs and Stephen King books don't tend to mix well. If a pooch ends up in a Stephen King book, I tend to grimace in advance because things are probably going to go south pretty quickly for that pup. With that in mind, I already mentioned Bobby has a dog Peter. Wow, those pages, hard to read. So in his non-fiction book on writing, King basically assigns the premise of this book to the H.P. Lovecraft story The Colour Out of Space, and an old poem that he was inspired by. And I'll read you it in full. Late last night and the night before, Tommyknockers, knocking on the door. I want to go out, don't know if I can, 'cause I'm so afraid of the Tommyknocker man. That poem is literally scarier than anything in this book. Now, this book on its own feels like a paranoia-induced, cocaine-driven binge by King, but it's worth bearing in mind that this was the 4th book that he published in 1987, if we're including the mass-market publication of The Eyes of the Dragon. 4 books in 1 year. I guess when somebody who is as naturally gifted and naturally prolific as King is powered by substances, there are always going to be some duds. Tommyknockers is a dud. So it's always fun to pick out connections between King's books and the rest of his work, so I'm going to take the next few of my 19 reasons to pick out some of the connections we find in Tommyknockers. First of all, Guard has a conversation, a hungover conversation, on a beach with a character from another shit Stephen King book. Yes, he chats to Travelling Jack, star of probably my least favourite book, The Talisman. 2, there's a dog who's accused of acting like a regular Cujo. 3, there's a sighting of a certain clown in a certain storm drain. 4, there's a reference to Johnny Smith's coma when we meet the reporter who told that story. 5, the Micmac Woods from Pet Sematary get a nod as well. 6, one character promises his brother a special G.I. Joe doll. Which G.I. Joe doll? Crystal Ball. Now, why is that significant? Because Crystal Ball was designed by Stephen King's youngest son, Owen, and it is widely thought of as being one of the worst G.I. Joe dolls ever. So it's appropriate that it's in one of King's worst books ever, right? 7, and lastly on the connections, our friends from The Shop turn up towards the end of the book and clean up some of the business. Now, I know I don't go into adaptations much on this, but I feel it's worth a mention here. This book, crazily, was turned into a mini-series in 1993, a god-awful mini-series, and King, like most sane people, doesn't like it. But his comments about it, they really did make me laugh. He said, "It felt kind of cheap and thrown together." So kind of like the source material then? So finally, this book is worth reading, not because it's good, because it's not, but because it is a fascinating insight into a struggling author's cry for help. And you can go into it and read it now knowing that that guy did get that help, and not long after this came out. You can feel King's addictions all over the pages of the Tommyknockers, and while that makes it a fucking tough book to read, it was also vital in his own turnaround and his drive towards the 90s, where for my money he did some of his most fascinating and incredible stuff. Basically, it's a key pivot in King's journey, and if you want to go through and understand him and his writing, where he goes after this, you do need to plough through what goes on in the Tommyknockers. And hey, some people actually like it. So there we go, 19 reasons to read the Tommyknockers. Let me know what you think of this batshit book in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you want more of these videos. And if you want to come and say hi on Instagram and tell me what you think about the Tommyknockers, I'm at Dave Musson. Thanks as always for watching. I'll see you soon. And leave those batteries alone.